Hey there. Tonight we are going back to the 1950s, a decade so sure of itself that doctors weighed pregnant women, scolded them for gaining too much, and then offered them a cigarette from the case on the desk. Trucks rolled down suburban streets on summer evenings, pumping out a fog of pesticide, while the children ran into it laughing, and shoe stores kept a machine that showed a child the bones inside her own feet, and children begged to go twice. None of these people were fools. They were just doing what everyone thought was completely normal at that time. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from and what time it is there. Somehow, it is always 2 a.m. somewhere. Now, dim the lights. Put on a fan if you like that soft wash of white noise. Settle into your pillow, unclench your jaw, and let your shoulders come down from around your ears, because tonight nobody is inspecting the house, and there is no casserole due anywhere. Have you ever wondered what was actually in that fog, and why nobody on the whole street thought to call the children in out of it? What was in the small brown bottle that sat in almost every medicine cabinet in America? The one a mother reached for at 2 a.m. when the baby would not stop crying. Why a maternity ward in 1958 needed leather cuffs, and why the father was kept in a room down the hall with an ashtray and a 9-year-old magazine. Why a company would refuse to promote a man until somebody had met his wife and written down an opinion of her. How a country this rich, this safe, and this thoroughly pleased with itself came to be filling 36 million prescriptions a year for a pill to get through the afternoon. And the strangest question of all, what are we doing this week with total confidence that will sound completely insane in 70 years? And now, congratulations. You have just woken up in September of 1958, in the second bedroom of a 2-story colonial on Larkspur Lane, in a development called Fairmount Acres, 22 miles outside Philadelphia. You are 29 years old, your name is Joan, you are 5 months along with your third, and your husband Ray is asleep beside you with one arm over his eyes like a man hiding from a searchlight. Down the hall are Kenny, who is 7, and Nancy, who is 5. And at the foot of the stairs is a beagle named Sputnik, who was named in October last year by a 7-year-old who had heard the word on the radio and considered it the funniest sound ever produced by human beings. Your alarm has about 4 minutes left to live. Try to remember where you are. Here is the first strange thing, and it is so large that people living inside it could not see it at all. This house did not exist 3 years ago, and neither did the street, and neither did the 400 other houses standing on what was, until very recently, a farm. Fairmount Acres was not built the way houses had been built for the previous 1,000 years, one at a time, by men who knew the ground. It was manufactured. Crews came through in waves, each wave doing one job and one job only. One crew pouring slabs all day for weeks, the next crew framing, the next roofing, the next painting, every man doing a single task 10,000 times until he could do it in his sleep, and behind them, at a rate nobody in history had ever seen, houses appeared. Yours has a living room, a kitchen with a window over the sink, a downstairs powder room, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, and a fireplace that is more of a suggestion than a fire. There are 4 exterior models, distinguished by the placement of a shutter and the pitch of a gable, and they alternate down the street in a pattern which your neighbour Marge Doyle can recite from memory, and which you have both agreed is the reason people drive past their own house on the way home at night. The lawn came in a roll. The trees came in a truck, each one a hopeful stick tied to a stake, and they will be beautiful in 1980, which is a date so far away that saying it out loud feels like science fiction. The bathroom is pink, not pale pink, pink, tile, basin, tub, and toilet. All of it a confident, unapologetic, wall-to-wall pink, because this decade believes very strongly that a bathroom should be a colour and it has selected this one on your behalf. And the whole thing, all of it, house and lawn and pink bathroom and the stick that will be a maple, cost a little over $11,000, financed over 30 years, at a rate that would make a modern buyer weep with envy, guaranteed by a government that had decided, after 2 wars and a depression, that the best thing it could possibly do for the American man was put him in a house of his own. For the American man. Hold on to that phrase. It comes back at the bank when you find out whose name is actually on all of this. And here is the part that the postcards leave out. Said once and said plainly, because you cannot honestly describe this street without it. The paperwork that built developments like this one, in the decade before yours, routinely contained a clause stating that the house could not be occupied by anyone who was not white. In 1948, the Supreme Court ruled those clauses unenforceable. So the biggest builders simply took the sentence out of the contract and kept the policy in the office, and it worked exactly as well without the sentence. By 1953, the largest of these developments, 70,000 people, was the largest community in the United States with not one black resident. Every family on your street knows this, in the way people know things they have decided not to examine. The mortgage that made your kitchen possible was, for millions of American families, simply not available, and the wealth that grew quietly out of these little houses over the next 50 years grew for some families and not others, on purpose, by design, in writing. It is the strangest normal on the whole street, and it is the one nobody mentions, and now we have mentioned it, and we can go and put the coffee on, because the alarm has gone, and the day starts with Ray. There is a whole choreography to a man leaving a house in 1958, and you have it down to the second. You are downstairs before he is, because that is simply how it is done. And the percolator is already making the noise. That means the day has legally begun. Ray comes down at 7 exactly, shaved, in the white shirt you ironed on Sunday, and he sits at the kitchen table and reads the front section of the paper while you put eggs in front of him, and neither of you finds this remarkable, because in every one of the 400 houses in Fairmount Acres, this same scene is being performed within about 11 minutes of itself. He eats eggs and toast. He drinks 2 cups of coffee. He smokes 1 cigarette with the second cup in the kitchen, 4 feet from his pregnant wife and shortly from his children, and taps it into the glass ashtray that lives on the kitchen table permanently, between the salt and the sugar bowl, the way a modern kitchen has a fruit bowl. At 7:20, Hank Doyle's car pulls up outside and does not stop so much as pause, and Ray takes his hat off the hook. He is 32 years old and he owns 3 hats. Every man on this street owns hats, and wears one every working day, without discussion, in the way modern men wear pants. He kisses you at the door. He says something to Sputnik. He gets into a car with 3 other men in near identical clothing, and they drive to the station, and from a distance the whole street at 7:20 looks like a very orderly evacuation, and then it is quiet. And here is a thing worth stopping on, because we are going to be talking about the strangeness of this decade all night, and it would be dishonest to skip the good parts. That quiet is real. There is nothing in your hand that buzzes. Nobody in another country can reach you. Nobody has photographed anything you did last weekend. The only interruption available to the outside world is a black telephone in the hall. And we will come to that telephone, because it is not as private as it looks. But for a moment, in a warm kitchen with a percolator ticking as it cools, you are as unreachable as a woman can be. And if you told your great-granddaughter about it, she would want to know where she can buy some. Then the children get up, and the second strange thing of the morning happens, which is that you are about to open the door and let them out into the world with no further supervision until food is required. Kenny is 7 and Nancy is 5, and by 8:10 they are gone. Kenny walks to school, half a mile, along a road, with a boy from 2 streets over, and no adult of any description. And this is not brave parenting, it is just parenting. And if you walked him there yourself, every mother on this block would quietly conclude that something was wrong with the boy. Nancy is at kindergarten in the mornings and comes home at midday. And after that, she is out. Out is the correct term, and it is beautifully undefined. Out means the street, the yards, the half-built section at the end of the development where the crews have not yet arrived, the drainage ditch, the woods behind the Petrosky house, and a large number of other people's kitchens. Children in 1958 are not scheduled. Nobody has arranged a play date, because that phrase does not exist and would be met with polite confusion, as though you had asked to book an appointment with a dog. The rule is the streetlights. When the streetlights come on, you come home. That is the entire safeguarding policy of the American suburb. And it is enforced not by you, but by a distributed intelligence network of mothers, each of whom is at a kitchen window, each of whom knows every child on the block by silhouette, and any one of whom will open a screen door and correct your child's behavior without hesitation, without asking you first, and without any expectation that you will mind. Marge Doyle has smacked the back of Kenny's leg for going into the ditch, and then telephoned you to tell you she did it, and you thanked her. Because that is the arrangement. 400 houses of women, none of them paid, none of them thanked, form a supervision system with better coverage than anything money can buy, and its coverage will collapse entirely within 1 generation when those women get jobs, and the country will be astonished and will blame the mothers. And yes, there are things out there. There is a busy road at the edge of the development, and there is a quarry, and there are ponds, and there is the fact that not one child on this street has ever worn a bicycle helmet, because bicycle helmets do not exist, and neither, in any meaningful way, does the concept of childproofing. Your medicine cabinet has no catch on it. Your kitchen cupboard, at knee height, contains bleach, ammonia, lye, and a can of pesticide, with a picture of a happy housewife on the front. There are electrical sockets at the exact altitude of a curious 5-year-old, and no plastic covers exist for them. Children of this decade are protected by exactly one thing, which is being told, and by exactly one enforcement mechanism, which is that if you touch, that you will be in trouble. And honestly, for most of them, most of the time, it works. And the ones it does not work for are a statistic that the decade prefers not to itemize. So the door goes twice, and the house is yours, and now it is time for the cigarette. You should understand how completely tobacco has soaked into this house, because it is one of those things that is invisible from the inside and staggering from the outside. There is an ashtray in the kitchen, an ashtray on the coffee table, an ashtray on the telephone table in the hall, an ashtray in the bedroom, and a small travelling ashtray in Ray's car built into the dashboard by the manufacturer, because the manufacturer assumed, correctly, that the driver would be smoking. There is a cigarette box on the sideboard for guests, and a table lighter next to it, a heavy chrome object shaped like an artillery shell, and keeping it filled is a hostess duty on precisely the same level as keeping the sugar bowl filled. You smoke, Ray smokes, Marge smokes, standing at your counter, tapping into your kitchen ashtray while her youngest chews the corner of your tablecloth. Your mother smokes, your doctor smokes, and we are getting to your doctor. People smoke in restaurants, on trains, in cinemas, in lifts, in offices with the windows shut, in the hospital corridors, on aeroplanes, at their desks in banks, at parents' evenings, and in the maternity ward, where in a few months a nurse will offer you one afterwards as a small kindness, and it will be received as one. About half the adults in the country are doing this. Nobody thinks of it as a habit any more than they think of shoes as a habit. And the advertising, oh the advertising. For 6 years, from 1946 to 1952, one of the largest campaigns in the country consisted of a man in a white coat with a stethoscope round his neck, telling you that more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette, a claim built on a survey of 113,000 physicians, which the company never explained, and which was conducted, as it happens, after those physicians had been mailed a free carton. The doctors in the pictures were actors. It worked magnificently. Other brands ran on the same principle. And a woman opening a magazine in this decade may find, in a single sitting, a cigarette recommended for her throat, her nerves, her digestion, and her figure. And this last one is the cleverest of all, because the industry worked out very early that if it could get a woman to reach for a cigarette instead of a sweet, it had her for 30 years. The strangest part is not that people smoked. The strangest part is that smoking was the healthy option. It was what you did instead of eating. It was what you did instead of being anxious. It was, in the language of the advertisements, what the doctor ordered, and in about 11 minutes, in a small office above a shoe store on the main street of town, a doctor is going to order it, because it is Tuesday, and Tuesday morning is Dr. Hollis. Dr. Hollis is 56. He has been delivering babies in this county since before the war. He is well liked, he is not a monster, and everything he is about to do to you is textbook best practice in 1958. That is the point of him. He is not the villain here. He is a competent, kindly, up-to-date professional man, and the entire distance between his world and yours is going to be demonstrated in the next 20 minutes without him doing a single thing that any colleague of his would question. First, the scale, and the scale is the whole appointment. You take off your shoes, and you step up, and he moves the little weight along the bar, and he makes a sound. It is not a good sound. You have gained 11 pounds, and you are 5 months along, and Dr. Hollis's view, which is the standard view of the obstetric profession in this decade, is that a woman should gain somewhere around 15 to 20 pounds in the entire pregnancy, full stop, and that going beyond it is a failure of discipline that produces a difficult delivery and a woman who never gets her figure back. He tells you to cut out bread. He tells you to cut out potatoes. He asks if you have been having a sweet after dinner, and you say sometimes, and he writes something down, and you feel, at 29 years old, carrying a human being, precisely like a girl who has been caught with her homework undone. Then he asks how your nerves are, and you say a bit jumpy, and he nods. And here comes the part that will make your great-granddaughter put down her tea. He tells you that if you are jumpy in the evening, a glass of sherry will not hurt you and will do you good. He means it, and he is stating the medical consensus of his time. There is no warning label on a bottle in this country, and will not be one for another 31 years. Fetal alcohol syndrome will not be named in Western medicine until 1973, in a paper in The Lancet, and the American Surgeon General will not advise pregnant women against drinking until 1981, which means that for the whole of your childbearing life, every doctor you meet will tell you that a small drink in the evening is a sensible way for an expectant mother to relax. Some of them will recommend a glass of stout for the iron. Nobody is being reckless. Everybody is following the science. And the science has not got there yet, and it will not get there for 15 more years, and there is no way for you, sitting in that chair, to know that. And then he opens the case on his desk, takes out a cigarette for himself, and offers you one. Yes. That. The thing from the very first sentence of tonight, the one that sounded like an exaggeration. You are sitting in it. And so far it has been the nicest appointment of your week. He lights it for you. And while you are drawing on it, he tells you that he would like you to keep it down to about 4 a day. Not stop. Keep it down, because the advice in this decade is moderation, and because there is a real belief that a woman quitting cigarettes will become agitated, and that agitation is worse for the baby than the smoke. There is even a school of thought, which he does not say out loud today, but which is in circulation among perfectly respectable physicians, that a cigarette is a useful tool for a woman who is gaining too much weight, and you have just been told you are gaining too much weight. Those two pieces of advice are sitting on the same desk, at the same appointment, and they fit together with a click. You leave with a prescription for iron tablets, a note of your next appointment, and instructions to relax with a sherry and hold it to 4 cigarettes. You feel looked after. That is the thing that is hardest to explain about this appointment. From where you are sitting now, you genuinely, warmly feel looked after. Because you were, by the standards available, and Dr. Hollis will personally deliver your baby in January, whatever the hour, and will not charge you for the extra visit in November when you are worried, and will remember the child's name for the rest of his life, which is what makes January the strangest thing on your calendar. Because you have not been told what actually happens in a delivery room in 1958. And Dr. Hollis is not going to tell you. And there is only one woman on this street who will. That woman is Marge Doyle, who is 34, who lives directly opposite, who has had 4 children in 9 years, and who is the closest thing this block has to a public records office. Marge comes over at 10:30 with a cup she does not need and a subject she has been circling for a couple of weeks, and she sits at your kitchen table and asks, without preamble, whether anybody has told you what it is like. And you say, what is like? And Marge lights a cigarette and says, January. Here is what is standard practice in an American hospital in 1958. When your labor is established, you will be taken from your husband at the door and put into a ward. You will be given an injection, and the injection is 2 things. One is a painkiller, morphine, or something newer in the same family. The other is scopolamine, which comes from a nightshade plant. And scopolamine is not a painkiller at all. Scopolamine is an amnesiac. It does not stop the pain. It stops the memory of the pain. The combination has been in use since 1907, and it is marketed to the public, beautifully, as twilight sleep, and generations of women have gone into it believing they will drift off and wake up with a baby. What actually happens, quite often, is that a woman under scopolamine remains entirely conscious and entirely in pain, and loses all orientation, and becomes frightened, and thrashes, and cries out, and tries to get off the bed. Which is why, in maternity wards across the country, there are leather cuffs, wrists, and ankles. It is not considered cruelty, and it is not written down anywhere as a punishment. It is written down as a safety measure to stop the patient injuring herself. And by the internal logic of the ward, it is exactly that. Women labor alone in these rooms for hours, restrained, with a nurse looking in, and then they are wheeled to a delivery room and their legs are put in stirrups. And the baby is delivered, and then the drug does the one thing it is very good at, which is to take the whole thing away, so that a woman comes round in a clean bed with her hair combed and a baby down the hall in a nursery behind glass, and remembers almost nothing, and is told she was marvellous. And this is the part Marge has come to tell you. Because Marge remembers. Not all of it, but not none of it either, which is the worst possible amount, and she has never once said this to her husband, and she says it to you now at your kitchen table with the ashtray between you and both hands round a cup, and then she says, well, and that is the whole sentence. Well, then she tells you about the magazine. In May of this year, 4 months ago, the Ladies' Home Journal, a publication that lives on coffee tables between the recipes and the knitting patterns, printed an article on cruelty in maternity wards, built largely out of letters from nurses. It described women left alone for hours in restraints. It described a woman whose legs were strapped together to delay a birth until the doctor had finished his dinner. It described episiotomies cut and stitched without anaesthetic, and women slapped for crying out. The magazine was buried in letters afterwards, thousands of them, from women all over the country who had been carrying this quietly and alone for years, and had assumed, each one of them, that it had been just her. Marge has that issue. It is in the bottom of the linen press under the good tablecloth, which tells you everything about where this decade files things it cannot discuss. And she is going to lend it to you, and she is going to say, do not leave it out. And it will change things, eventually. Not this year, and not for you in January, but the article is the crack that the water gets into. It is one of the reasons that within about 15 years, American hospitals will start letting husbands into delivery rooms, and within 25, the whole architecture of the thing will be unrecognizable. You are living in the last decade of it, on the wrong side of the line, and the only thing you will get out of that fact is that your daughter Nancy will not, which brings us neatly to Ray, and to where Ray will be while all of this is happening, because his position that night is every bit as strange as yours, and nobody in 1958 thinks so either. Ray will be in the waiting room. That is not a joke, and it is not laziness, it is policy. Fathers are not permitted in American delivery rooms in 1958, and will not be in most hospitals for another 15 years or so. The stated reasons are infection control, and the risk of a man fainting and creating a second patient, and the professional view that the presence of the husband makes the woman emotional and the physician's job harder. The unstated reason, which is the real one, is that childbirth belongs to the hospital now, and the hospital does not want an untrained civilian in the room with opinions. So there is a room, and the room has a name, and the name is the Stork Club, and it is a small square space with a row of chairs, a full ashtray, an ancient magazine, and a number of men in overcoats who have never met, sitting at 3 a.m, waiting to be told something by a stranger in a corridor. They smoke. Of course they smoke. Some hospitals put a cigarette machine right there because they understand the market. Occasionally a man will start talking to another man, and what they will talk about is baseball, and the weather, and the parking, and never, at any point, the thing that all of them are actually doing, which is being frightened for their wives one wall away, and having no permission of any kind to say so. And when it is done, a nurse comes to the door and says the words, and Ray will stand up and shake hands with a man he has known for 9 hours and will never see again, and he will be taken to look at his son or his daughter through a sheet of glass. And then he will be sent home, because visiting hours are visiting hours. He will not hold the baby for a day. He will not have been within 30 feet of the actual birth. And in 20 years, when Kenny's wife is having a baby, Kenny will be in the room with a hand on her back, and Ray will find this astonishing and slightly indecent, and will say so once at a Christmas dinner, and then will not say it again, because the look Nancy gives him will end the discussion permanently. Marge goes home at 11, and the house is quiet again, and it is Tuesday. And Tuesday is not the worst day, because Monday is the worst day, and Monday is the laundry. And here we arrive at one of the great contricks of the 20th century, which is the labour-saving device. Your kitchen and your basement are absolutely full of them. You have a washing machine, an electric iron, a vacuum cleaner, a refrigerator with a freezer compartment, an electric mixer, a toaster, and a gas cooker with an eye-level grill, and every single one of these things is genuinely marvellous, and your grandmother would weep to see them, and you have never in your life worked as many hours in a week as you do now. Take the washing machine, which is a wringer machine, and if you have only ever met the modern kind, then let me explain what Monday involves. You fill it with a hose, you wash the whites first, because you are going to reuse the water, and you feed each item, by hand, one at a time, through 2 rubber rollers on the top of the machine that squeeze the water out, and if you are careless or tired or a 5-year-old wanders in and says something at the wrong moment, those rollers will take your fingers, then your hand, then your forearm, and every woman on this street knows somebody it happened to. Then the coloureds go in the same water. Then the work clothes. Then it all goes through a rinse and through the rollers again, and then out to the line. and a family of 4 in 1958 generates a quantity of washing that has to be seen to be believed, because Ray needs a fresh white shirt every single working day. And those shirts are cotton, and cotton in this decade means starching. And starching means ironing, and ironing means Tuesday. That is the trick. The machines did not reduce the work. They raised the standard. When laundry was done in a tub by hand, a shirt was worn for 3 days, and everybody's shirt was worn for 3 days, and nobody thought anything about it. Now that there is a machine, the shirt is expected to be immaculate daily. The sheets are expected to be changed weekly. The children are expected to be spotless, and the floor is expected to shine. And the woman who fails any of these is not failing at housework. She is failing at being a wife, because the whole thing has been quietly reclassified from labor into love, and love does not get a day off and does not get paid. Your mother, who did all of this without a single machine, worked fewer hours at it than you do. Nobody has told either of you this. And if you worked it out, you would not be able to say it, because it sounds mad, and you are on your feet all day for it, 5 months pregnant, in a girdle, because yes, you are wearing one, even now, even here, even at 11:30 in your own empty kitchen, and there is a maternity version with panels, and it is exactly as much fun as it sounds. Then the telephone rings, which requires an explanation, because the telephone in the hall is not the telephone you are thinking of. It is black and it is heavy, and it is rented, not owned, from the phone company. And it has a dial. And it sits on a purpose-built little table with a seat attached, because a call is a thing you sit down for, and it is on a party line, which means it is not your line, it is shared. 3/4 of American residential customers are on party lines in this decade, sharing a single circuit with 2 or 4 or in rural places, a dozen other households. And what that means in practice is this. When a call comes in, every telephone on the line rings, in every house, and each household is identified by its ring pattern. Yours is 2 long. The Fusco house next door is 1 long and 2 short. Mrs. Ferguson, 3 houses down, is 3 short, and Mrs. Ferguson is the reason this entire arrangement is famous, because anybody on the line can pick up at any time and hear everything. There is a whole etiquette around it. You are supposed to lift the receiver, establish that the line is in use, and put it down again immediately, what you are actually supposed to do, and what everyone on this block does, is lift the receiver very slowly with a finger on the switch hook so it makes no click, and then listen to the entire conversation while doing the dishes. Mrs. Ferguson does not even do the switch hook part. Mrs. Ferguson simply picks up and breathes, and you can hear her clock, and once, memorably, you could hear her budgerigar, and when Marge finally said, "Good morning, Mrs. Ferguson," there was a silence of about 4 seconds, and then the sound of a receiver being replaced with tremendous dignity. So there is no privacy on the telephone. None. It is understood that any conversation you have may be heard by 3 neighbors, and therefore certain things are simply never said into a telephone in 1958. Money is not discussed. Illness is discussed only in code. Anything to do with a marriage is discussed only in person, in a kitchen, with the radio on. An entire generation of American women developed a face-to-face intelligence network of extraordinary sophistication, and it was not because they were nosy, although they were, it was because the alternative was a party line, and a party line is a public square with a bell on it. And if that sounds unbearable, consider that they at least knew who was listening, and could hear her breathing, and could, if provoked, say good morning to her. You put the phone down and the doorbell goes, and it will go again and again, because in 1958 the world comes to the house. This is one of the genuinely lovely strange things, and it has been almost entirely forgotten and then invented again 70 years later by people who think it is new. Your milk arrives at the door. Vince brings it before 6, in glass bottles, with the cream at the top, and takes yesterday's empties. And if you want an extra pint, you leave a note in the neck of a bottle, and the account is settled at the end of the week. The bread man comes twice a week. There is a man who comes with fish on Fridays, an egg man, and in the summer a produce truck that parks at the top of the road and sounds a horn. The Fuller brush man comes to the door with a case of brushes and will stand on the step and demonstrate one. And the man from the encyclopedia company comes twice a year and is extremely difficult to remove. And there is a diaper service, an actual service, that takes away a pail of dirty terry diapers twice a week and brings back a stack of clean ones, which is a thing that existed and worked and vanished. And the doctor comes to the house. That is the one that stops people. If Nancy has a fever at 10 at night, you telephone Dr. Hollis at his home, where he answers, and he comes with a leather bag and sits on the edge of a child's bed. And this is not a special favor. It is simply what a doctor does. There is no waiting room, no triage, no form. There is also, and this is the trade, almost nothing he can do beyond looking, listening, and reassuring, because the diagnostic equipment of a house call is a stethoscope, a thermometer, and 30 years of judgment. And if it turns out to be something serious, he has lost time. It is a wonderful system with a hole in the middle of it, and the hole is the reason it will be replaced. So the doorbell goes all morning. And the strange thing is not that the world came to the door. The strange thing is that a woman with no car, in a house 2 miles from anything, in a development with no pavements to speak of, and no bus, could run an entire household anyway, because the alternative had been engineered around her. She is the customer who cannot travel. So commerce learned to walk. But some things you go out for. And today, one of them is the market, and going out means the car. And a 1958 family car is a beautiful object, and, by any measure you would apply today, an absolutely lethal one. You have the wagon on Tuesdays, which is the arrangement, because Ray takes the sedan to the station on the days Hank does not drive. It is enormous. It is two-tone, cream over turquoise, with a chrome grille like a set of teeth and fins at the back that serve no purpose whatsoever except joy. It weighs about 2 tons. It has a Veit engine, drum brakes on all 4 wheels that will stop it eventually if you plan ahead, and a steering wheel connected to a solid steel column that runs in a straight line from the front bumper to the center of your chest. The dashboard is painted metal, with a row of chrome knobs sticking out of it at exactly face height, and the interior mirror is mounted on a rigid steel stalk. There are no head restraints. There is no collapsible anything. There is a lot of glass, and none of it is laminated in the way you would want. And there are no seat belts, because you did not order any. They were available. Ford offered them as an option 2 years ago as part of a whole safety package, along with a padded dashboard and a dished steering wheel. And the result of that campaign is one of the sadder footnotes of the decade. About 1 Ford buyer in 7 took the belts. Just over 40% took the padded dash, because padding looks like luxury and a belt looks like an admission. The company's sales were unremarkable that year, and the entire industry drew the conclusion that safety does not sell cars, and put the idea away for a decade. There are people, right now, in 1958, who will tell you with total confidence that a belt is more dangerous than no belt, because you want to be thrown clear, and this is stated in the tone of a man who has thought about it. So Nancy travels the way every child in America travels. Loose. She stands on the front bench seat next to you, holding the top of the dashboard, because she likes to see, and this is normal. And every wagon on the road has a small person standing up in the front of it like a figurehead. On a longer trip, she is in the back, which in a wagon means the whole flat deck behind the seats, laid out with a blanket and a pillow, a mobile bedroom with a panoramic window, and children of this decade will remember lying back there, watching the sky go by for hours as one of the great pleasures of their childhood, which it clearly was. There is such a thing as a car seat for babies, and it is worth understanding exactly what it is. A little canvas and tube frame chair that hooks over the seat back to raise the infant up so it can see out, and so the mother can see it. It is a height adjustment. It has no crash function of any kind, and one popular design essentially hangs the baby in a bag with its feet dangling, and the safety device actually deployed, the one in universal service across the United States of America in 1958, is your right arm. When you brake hard, your right arm comes across the child. Every mother does it. Every mother of that generation will still be doing it in 1990 with a grown adult in the passenger seat, and they will laugh about it. And it will be the single most touching involuntary gesture in the history of transport, because it is not a policy, it is a reflex. And it was, for a very long time, the entire crash protection system for a whole country's children. Also, and you will simply have to sit with this one, everybody smokes in the car with the windows up, and the ashtray is built in, and there is a cigarette lighter as standard, and nobody wonders why the children in the back are quiet. The supermarket is 10 minutes away, and it is only about 6 years old, and it is still, faintly, a marvel. There was no such thing when you were a girl. There was a grocer who stood behind a counter, and you asked him for things, and he fetched them, and you paid on account at the end of the month, and he knew your family. Now there is a plate glass front, a car park, trolleys, and aisles you walk down yourself, picking things up with your own hands, which sounds like nothing and was a revolution, because it meant the store was no longer a conversation, it was a display, and a display can persuade you. The prices, since we are here, a loaf of bread is about 19 cents. A dozen eggs is about 60. A pound of coffee is somewhere near 80. Milk is around $1 the gallon. Ray earns a little under $6,000 a year, which puts you comfortably in the middle of the American middle, and out of that comes the mortgage, the car, the insurance, the doctor, and everything else, on one wage, in a house you own, with 3 children. And this is the single fact about the 1950s that will cause the most trouble 70 years from now, when it gets remembered without any of the rest of tonight attached to it. At the end of the aisle is the cigarette display, and it is completely open, at chest height, next to the candy. There is no age check because there is essentially no enforcement anybody takes seriously, and it is entirely routine for a child of 9 to be sent to the store with a note and the money for his mother's cigarettes, and to come back with them, and with change, and quite possibly with a sweet for the errand. There is a machine in the lobby too, with a knob you pull, in case the store is shut. Kenny has done this. It did not occur to anyone involved as an event. And, at the checkout, there are the stamps. Green stamps, in a roll, one for every 10 cents you spend. And you take them home, and you lick them, and you stick them into little books. And when you have filled enough books, you take them to a redemption center and exchange them for a lamp, or a toaster, or a set of luggage, from a catalogue you have been studying for 8 months. This is your loyalty point scheme, and it costs you your tongue. The company will eventually claim it prints more stamps than the post office, and whether or not that survives close inspection, it tells you the scale of the thing. Nancy is allowed to lick and stick, which is a treat, and which means every book in the house has one page that is noticeably crooked and slightly damp. Then, because her feet have gone up again, you take Nancy to the shoe store, and the shoe store has the machine. It stands in the middle of the floor, a wooden cabinet about 4 feet high, with a step at the bottom and 3 viewing hoods at the top. Nancy puts her feet into the opening at the bottom in her new shoes, and the salesman throws the switch, and a green glowing image appears in each of the 3 viewers. 1 viewer for the customer, 1 for the salesman, 1 for the mother. And what all 3 of you are looking at is a live, moving X-ray of the bones of a 5-year-old's feet inside her shoes, and she wiggles her toes, and the little bones wiggle, and she laughs, and everybody laughs, because it is genuinely delightful. It is called a shoe-fitting fluoroscope. It was developed in the First World War to look at soldiers' feet without removing their boots. And after the war, somebody very clever realized it would sell shoes, and there are about 10,000 of them in shoe stores across the United States. The nominal justification is that it proves the fit. The actual function is that it is the best free entertainment on the high street. And children beg to be taken, and get in the line twice, and stand in it for as long as the salesman will let them, because you can watch your own bones move. The machines are not shielded to anything you would call a standard. The dose to the customer is not trivial. The dose to the salesman, who stands beside it 40 hours a week for years, is considerably worse, and the physics of what is happening in that cabinet has been perfectly well understood by scientists for a decade, while the cabinet stayed on the shop floor. Pennsylvania, which is the state you are standing in, became the first in the country to ban them last year, in 1957, which means the machine in this particular shop has been quietly switched off and is currently being used as a place to put the box of shoehorns. In most of the rest of the country, they are still running. By 1960, 34 states will have banned them. 17 states will still permit them as late as 1970. Nancy will remember the green light and the wiggling bones her whole life, and will describe it to her own children, who will not believe her. You get home at 4, and the children go back out. And here is the next thing. And this is the one where the decade takes off its coat. At about 5 o'clock, you make a drink. Not a special drink, not a celebration. A drink in the kitchen on a Tuesday, in the ordinary run of the day. And this is so unremarkable that it does not have a name beyond the hour it happens in. It is the cocktail hour. Ray will make one when he gets in, and he will make you one, or you will already have made one. And there will be another with dinner, and possibly a nightcap, and the total volume of alcohol that a perfectly respectable American couple puts away on an ordinary weekday in this decade is a number that a modern doctor would want to discuss with you at some length. Nobody here regards it as drinking. Drinking is what a man does who cannot hold a job. This is a highball, and the whole society is built around it. Ray's lunch, on a good day, is a business lunch. And a business lunch means 2 martinis before the food, and it is a deductible expense, which is to say that the tax code of the United States is at this moment subsidizing the drinking of its middle managers. There are trolleys in offices. There are bottles in desk drawers. And this is not a shameful secret. It is stock, and a man who cannot produce a drink for a visiting client at 4 in the afternoon is embarrassed. Almost every social event of your life is organized around a tray. The barbecue, the bridge night, the christening, the wake, the meeting about the school, and the moment a man arrives anywhere, the first sentence spoken to him by his host is a question about what he is having. And you, 5 months pregnant, in a kitchen, with a sherry, on the express written instruction of a physician, you are not doing anything wrong. You are following medical advice. Dr. Hollis would nod. Every other woman in your condition on this street has the same glass in her hand in the evening, and their doctors said the same thing, and the whole of American obstetrics has no idea, and will have no idea for another 15 years, and there is nothing whatsoever that you, standing in that kitchen, can do with information that does not exist yet. I want to be careful here, because it would be very easy to make this cruel, and there is nothing cruel about it. Those women were not careless. They were, almost to a woman, obsessively careful. They followed instructions that were wrong, given in good faith by men who had read the current literature, and the literature was wrong, and the correction took 15 years to arrive, and when it arrived, it did not come with an apology addressed to anybody. That is what most historical wrongdoing actually looks like from inside. It does not look like villainy. It looks like a sensible woman doing as she is told. And in the cupboard above the drink, next to the aspirin, there is a small brown bottle with a druggist's label, and inside it is Milltown. You need to understand how big Milltown was, because there has never been anything quite like it. It arrived in May of 1955, a tranquilizer. and in its first month it sold about $7,500 worth. And by the end of that same year it had sold 2 million. By 1957, Americans were filling something like 36 million prescriptions a year for it. More than 1 billion pills had been manufactured, and it was the best-selling prescription drug in the country. Within a year of launch, roughly 1 American in 20 had tried it. It was the fastest-selling drug in the history of the United States, and it got there with almost no advertising, purely by word of mouth. Which is to say, by women telling other women in kitchens. They called it the peace pill. They called it emotional aspirin. Hollywood took it by the handful and joked about it on television. There were bowls of it at parties, actual bowls, passed round with the nuts, and there was a fashionable cocktail that consisted of a martini and a Milltown, and was known by a name that combined the two. Your druggist has a sign in the window. Doctors handed it out for nerves, for tension, for a difficult husband, for a difficult mother-in-law, for a woman who cries in the afternoon and cannot say why, and nobody, at any point in that transaction, asked the obvious question, which is why so many millions of well-fed, well-housed, comfortable American women in brand-new houses with brand-new appliances needed something to take the edge off a Tuesday. That question does get asked. Eventually. It gets asked in 1963. In a book by a woman who went and interviewed her old college classmates and found them all, every one of them, in nice houses, with nice husbands, quietly falling apart, and she called it the problem that has no name. And the reason it had no name is that the country had spent a decade putting a pill on top of it. Milltown was not a scandal in 1958. Milltown was self-care. And the strange thing, the really strange thing, is not that it existed. It is that 36 million prescriptions a year in a country of 170 million people was read by absolutely everybody as evidence that modern medicine was working. And next to the Milltown there is a second small bottle, and the second bottle is worse. It is dextrine. And dextrine is an amphetamine. And Dr. Hollis did not prescribe it. Your family doctor did, in about 4 minutes, last spring, because you said you wanted to lose the weight from Nancy and he agreed that you should. That is the entire clinical encounter. In this decade, amphetamines are the standard, respectable, mainstream treatment for a woman who wishes to be thinner, and by 1952 American factories were producing something in the order of 3 billion 10-milligram amphetamine tablets a year, which is not a typographical error, and which works out at roughly 18 tablets for every man, woman and child in the country annually. The pharmaceutical companies, having sold amphetamines to the military during the war, came home and looked for a peacetime market, and found one immediately, and the market was housewives. The pitch was not subtle. Here is a pill that will make you thin and give you energy and lift your mood and let you get the whole house done before lunch. All 3 of those claims are, in the short term, completely true, which is precisely the problem. And because it makes sleep impossible, there is a second pill for the evening. A barbiturate to bring you back down. And a very large number of women in this decade are running their entire nervous system on a morning tablet and an evening tablet and a drink in between, and their doctors know because their doctors wrote all 3. You stopped taking yours when you fell pregnant, on your own initiative, because it felt wrong, not because anybody told you to. Nobody told you to. The bottle is still up there next to the aspirin, with about 40 tablets in it, at eye height, in an unlocked cupboard, in a house with 2 small children, and that is the last strange thing about it, and the one that will take longest to fix. Because once you start opening cupboards in a 1958 house, it is quite hard to stop, and the house turns out to be a small and cheerful chemical works. Under the kitchen sink, at the height of a toddler's face, behind a door with no catch on it, there is bleach, ammonia, lye for the drains, carbon tetrachloride for spot cleaning, which is a liquid that will damage a liver through the skin, and which is sold as a household stain remover and a can of DDT powder with a picture of a smiling woman on the front, because DDT is not a controlled substance in this decade. It is a shopping item. You can buy it as a powder, as a spray, in wallpaper impregnated with it for a nursery, in a paint for the inside of a cupboard. It is in the dog's flea powder. It went out on 80 million tons of American farmland this year. It is regarded, correctly by the standards of 1958, as one of the great humanitarian inventions of the century, because it broke typhus and it broke malaria, and it saved a number of lives that runs into the millions. And none of that is going to stop being true when the rest of it comes out. There is a woman in Pennsylvania at this very moment, working quietly on a book about what it is doing to the birds. It will come out in 1962. It will change everything, and the country will spend 4 years arguing about whether she was hysterical. The walls are painted with lead. All of them, and the woodwork twice over, because lead paint is the good paint, the durable paint, the one you use in a nursery, precisely because it washes and it lasts. Residential lead paint will not be banned in this country until 1978. The pipes have lead in the solder. The gasoline in the wagon is leaded, and the exhaust goes out along a street where the children play. Nobody is being careless. Lead is simply what things are made of. The boiler in the basement is wrapped in asbestos, and it is fraying, and Kenny keeps a small piece of it in a cigar box with a bird's skull and a foreign coin. The ironing board cover is asbestos. The oven glove has asbestos in it. At Christmas, the fake snow you drape on the tree has been made of asbestos for years, which means that a great many American children have spent Christmas morning under a tree dusted with something that is, in this decade, still simply called snow. And in the schoolroom, on the teacher's desk, there is mercury. When a thermometer breaks, and thermometers break, the little silver bead is not a hazard. It is a toy. Children push it around a desk with a fingertip to make it split and join. There are science teachers in this country who pour a cupful into a child's hand so they can feel how heavy it is. Kenny has done this and reported it at dinner as the highlight of his week. And you said, "That is nice, love," and passed the potatoes. And in the corner of the backyard, on a small concrete pad, there is the incinerator. And every household on this street has one. There is no bin collection here for burnable trash, because burnable trash is your job. Twice a week, you carry out the paper and the packaging and the vegetable trimmings and anything else that will go. And you light it. And you stand there with a rake in one hand, and up it goes. Every yard on this street does it. The whole development, 400 houses, sends up 400 columns of smoke on a still evening, and the smell of burning trash is simply the smell of a Tuesday. And if you have ever wondered why the men and women of that generation described their childhoods as smelling of wood smoke, this is why, and it was not wood smoke. Los Angeles County counted about 1.5 million of these things in its backyards and banned them outright last October. And there was genuine public fury about it, because people had been told for years that the incinerator was the modern, hygienic way to deal with waste. And now they were being told it was the reason they could not see the mountains. And then, at dusk, the truck comes. You hear it before you see it. A low-rising drone at the top of Larkspur Lane. And every child within a quarter mile drops what it is doing. Because this is the best thing that happens all week. It is the mosquito truck. And behind it, pouring out of a nozzle at the back in enormous soft billowing volumes, is a dense white fog that fills the street from curb to curb and hangs in it, and rolls over the lawns, and swallows the hedges, and turns the whole ordinary suburban evening into something out of a dream, and the children run into it. All of them. On bicycles, on roller skates, on foot, shrieking, disappearing into the white and coming out the other side and going back in. And the truck goes at walking pace up one street and down the next with a comet's tail of delighted children behind it. And mothers stand on their steps and watch and do not call them in, because there is nothing to call them in from. This is the town spraying for mosquitoes. It is a public health measure. It is being done for the children's sake. Partly on the widespread belief that mosquitoes carry polio, which turns out not to be how polio works at all, and the fog is DDT in an oil carrier, and it is being pumped down a residential street twice a week in summer at a density you could get lost in. Kenny will remember this as one of the purest joys of his childhood. He will describe it, at 60, to a grandchild, and he will use the words like being inside a cloud, and the grandchild will look at him the way you would look at a man who had just described being tucked in with a rattlesnake. And Kenny will say, "Well, we did not know." And that will be entirely true. The federal ban is 14 years away. There is a reason the town is fogging the streets, and the reason is fear. And the fear is worth explaining because it is the shadow lying over every summer of your adult life. Polio. You have watched it come every year since you were a girl, always in the warm months, always in children, arriving with no explanation anybody could act on. 1952 was the worst. Something like 58,000 cases in one American year, more than 3,000 dead, 21,000 left paralyzed, and nobody knew how it moved. So the country did what frightened people do, which is everything. Public swimming pools stood empty in August heat. Mothers kept children out of the movie theatre, off the bus, away from the drinking fountain, away from other children, and watched them at bedtime for a stiff neck the way sailors watch weather. The photographs in the newspapers were the worst part. Wards of iron lungs in rows, each one with a child's head sticking out of the end of it, and every mother in America looked at those photographs and did the arithmetic on her own children. And there was no vaccine, and no treatment, and no advice that was actually any use, only luck. And then, on the 12th of April 1955, they announced the vaccine worked. You remember exactly where you were. Everybody remembers exactly where they were. It came over the radio in the middle of the day, the trial results, safe and effective, and the country simply came apart with relief. Stores put signs in the windows. Church bells were rung. People wept in the street and telephoned strangers. There was talk of a national holiday, and the man who developed it went on television and was asked who owned the patent and said, well, the people, and that there was no patent, and asked whether you could patent the sun. Within a couple of years, the American case count fell from 58,000 to about 5,500, and then kept falling, and the thing that had defined every childhood summer for a generation simply stopped. Kenny had his in 1956, in a school hall, in a line, and cried, and got a lollipop, and it is the reason that when you look at him running through DDT fog with his mouth open, you feel, on the whole, that things are getting better. And you are right. That is the thing about this decade that the mockery misses. They were not fools. They were people living in the exact middle of a long correction, with some of the answers in and most of them not, doing their best with a partial delivery, which is a description that also fits us. And if that thought makes you slightly uncomfortable at midnight, then I have done my job. There is one more fear, and it is a strange one, because it is enormous, and nobody does anything about it at all. At school, Kenny practices for the end of the world. The drill has a name, and a cartoon turtle who presents it, and the film has been showing in American classrooms since 1952. When you see the flash, you duck, and you cover. Under the desk, face down, hands laced behind the neck, away from the window. Kenny is 7, and he can do it in about 4 seconds, and is competitive about it. Some school districts issue the children metal identification tags on a chain to wear around their necks, which are described to the parents as being useful in an emergency and are, in unambiguous fact, for identifying a child's body. That is what they are for. Everybody involved in that decision understood exactly what they were for, and the tags were issued, and the children wore them and thought they were smashing because they looked like the ones soldiers had. On the radio dial in your kitchen, there are two little triangles printed on the glass, at 640 and at 1240. Every radio sold in this country has them. They mark the civil defense frequencies, and the arrangement is that in the event of an attack, every broadcast station in America goes off the air, and the emergency information comes from those 2 points on the dial, and the reason for that is to stop enemy aircraft navigating in on the signals of American radio stations. That is the level of thinking. It is printed on your kitchen radio, next to the dial you use for the ball game. The government has distributed something like 400 million pieces of survival literature. Magazines run cheerful features on the family shelter. 3 streets over, on Bellflower, a man has actually built one. A proper concrete room under his backyard, with a hatch and shelves, and the block's response to this has not been admiration. It has been an intense and long-running debate, conducted in kitchens, about the etiquette of the situation, specifically whether he would let anyone else in, and what a person is supposed to do about that, and whether it is decent to plan to be turned away. Marge's position is that she would take her 4 children and stand on his hatch. Most families do nothing at all, because the honest reaction of the American public to the possibility of nuclear annihilation is roughly the same as the honest reaction of anybody to anything enormous, which is to think about it for a moment and then get on with the washing. And there is something on the kitchen table that we have walked past 4 times tonight. It is the bank statement, and it is addressed to Mr. Raymond Brennan, only to him. The account is his. The mortgage is his. The car is registered to him. The insurance is in his name, and you are listed on it in the same way the spare wheel is listed. You do all the household accounts, every week, at that table, with a pencil, and you have done since the week you married, and you are better at it than he is by a margin that both of you privately acknowledge, and none of it is yours. If you wanted a charge account at the department store in town, you would need his signature. If you wanted to buy a car, a bank would want his signature. If you and he had bought this house on the strength of 2 incomes, a mortgage lender in this decade would very likely have discounted yours to half, or ignored it altogether, on the explicit stated reasoning that you are a woman of childbearing age and will stop working. And there is no law anywhere that says they cannot do that. And there will not be one until 1974. 1974. Kenny will be 23. That is the year an American woman gets the legal right to a mortgage, a business loan, or a credit card in her own name without a man attached to the application. 16 more years. And when it comes, thousands of women who have run households, kept books, and managed budgets for decades will apply for credit for the first time in their lives and be told they have no credit history because every payment they ever made on time was recorded under a husband's name. And if you thought, this morning, that you might go out and earn some of your own, there is the newspaper on the same table, and you can open it to the back and see exactly what is on offer, because the jobs are printed in 2 lists. Help wanted, male, help wanted, female, 2 separate columns in every newspaper in the country, and they are not subtle. The male column has the management, the engineering, the sales positions with a car. The female column has typing, filing, switchboard and store work at about 60 cents on the dollar, with the words attractive and young appearing in the advertisements as job requirements, printed in a newspaper with no embarrassment whatsoever. It will be made unlawful in 1964, and the newspapers will simply keep doing it anyway for another 5 or 6 years while the lawyers argue, and the columns will not finally disappear until the early 1970s. So the money is his, the credit is his, the paper prints your options in a separate column, and you are the household's chief financial officer with a pencil and no signature. And that is only the money. The law has a few opinions as well. Suppose, hypothetically, standing at that table with the pencil and the statement addressed to somebody else, that you decided you had had enough of the whole arrangement. Suppose you wanted out. You cannot simply leave. Not legally, not cleanly. There is no such thing in 1958 as a divorce because it is not working. Divorce in America is a fault system, which means that in order to be released from a marriage, you must go into a court and prove that your husband did something, and the list of somethings is short and specific and varies by state. Adultery, desertion, extreme cruelty, habitual drunkenness, imprisonment, not unhappiness, not loneliness, not the fact that you married at 21, a man you had known for 9 months, and are now, at 29, a stranger to yourself. You must produce a wrong, with evidence, in public. And if you cannot produce one, then the marriage stands, and everybody involved knows it, including him. What this actually generates is an enormous machinery of pretense. Couples who both want out and have no grounds arrange grounds. There are men who check into hotels with a hired woman and a photographer in order to manufacture the necessary adultery, and lawyers who will suggest it, and judges who can see it from a mile away and grant the decree anyway because the alternative is chaining 2 people together for spite. Some couples take a long trip to a state with looser rules and a residency requirement of 6 weeks, and the entire economy of one desert city is built on the traffic. The first no-fault divorce law in this country will pass in California in 1969, 11 years away. And the law has more to say. In several states, if you and Ray jointly own something, he has the legal right to manage and dispose of it without your agreement, and you have no equivalent right. And the statutes describing this arrangement use the phrase head and master without a trace of irony. The last of those provisions will not be struck down until the 1980s. You may not be called for jury service in Florida unless you volunteer, and in 17 other states plus the capital, a woman has an absolute exemption purely on the basis of being a woman, which sounds generous and functions as an exclusion because the practical result is jury rooms with no women in them. 3 states do not permit it at all. A woman will take this to the Supreme Court in 1961, having been convicted of murdering her husband by an all-male jury, and she will lose. And the court will explain, in writing, that woman is still regarded as the center of home and family life, and that this makes the distinction reasonable. 10 years ago, the same court upheld a Michigan law that forbade a woman from working as a bartender unless she happened to be the wife or the daughter of the man who owned the bar. That is a real statute and a real judgment. A woman could not pour a drink for money unless a man in her family owned the room she poured it in, and there are things not in any statute that everyone understands anyway. A pregnant woman is expected to leave her job, and if she teaches, she will be required to, because a visibly pregnant woman at the front of a classroom is regarded as an indecency, and school boards write this into policy and enforce it without embarrassment. If you fly with an airline as a stewardess, you must be unmarried, and you will be dismissed on marriage, and you will be dismissed anyway at around 32, and in the meantime you will be weighed. And within a marriage there is a category of wrong that the law of this decade does not recognize as a wrong at all, because a wife is understood to have given a standing consent on the day of the wedding that she cannot subsequently withdraw, and the first American state to remove that exemption is more than 2 decades away. It is not talked about. It has no name yet. It will get one. None of this is a secret. All of it is simply the water, and the fish are not in a position to remark on it. And the remarkable thing, the genuinely remarkable thing, is how many of those women went on to raise daughters who took the whole arrangement apart, and did it in 1 generation, and did it largely because their mothers, who could not say any of this out loud, made absolutely certain that the girls got educated. Open the front door and look past the end of Larkspur Lane, because everything we have counted so far has been counted from inside a comfortable house, and this decade did not distribute its strangeness evenly. It is September of 1958. 800 miles southwest of your kitchen, in Little Rock, Arkansas, there are 4 high schools standing empty, and they are empty on purpose. Last year, 9 black students went into one of them under the protection of federal troops sent by the President of the United States, because the governor of the state had used the National Guard to keep them out. This month, rather than let it happen a second time, that governor invoked new state laws and closed every public high school in the city. All 4 of them, including the black high school. Nearly 4,000 children have nowhere to go this term. And a couple of weeks from tonight, on the 27th of September, the white voters of that city will be asked in a public ballot whether they would rather reopen the schools integrated or keep them shut, and they will vote to keep them shut by 19,470 to 7,561. The schools will stay closed for the whole year. People there will call it the lost year, and the children who lost it will still be called that when they are old. That is happening this month, in this country, while you set a table. And it is not only there. 2 years ago, a bus boycott in Alabama went on for 381 days, walking in all weather until the Supreme Court struck the law down. In enormous parts of the United States in 1958, a family cannot stop at a hotel on a long drive, or eat in most restaurants, or use most lavatories, and there is a guidebook, printed annually and sold quietly, whose entire purpose is to list the places along an American highway where a black family can safely stop. And people plan vacations around it and pack food for 2 days because there is nowhere to buy any. The suburb you are standing in was, as we said this morning, built with a clause. And the interest of that clause is not that it was uniquely wicked, it is that it was ordinary and legal and printed and thought of by the people who wrote it as prudent business. It is the same thing we keep finding, extended into the place where it stops being funny. Everything on our list is a thing that decent people did without hesitating, because everybody around them was doing it. And it takes an extraordinary act of imagination to see the water while you are in it. And most people, in most decades, including this one, including ours, simply do not manage it. Right, and I am not going to leave you there. Let us go back to the house, where the children are. Because the nursery of 1958 has some things in it that will genuinely make you laugh out loud, and then it has one thing in it that will not. The bathroom cabinet, then. Up on the wall, behind the mirror, above the pink basin, in the house of a careful mother of 2, with a 3rd on the way, there is aspirin, which is the answer to almost everything. There is a children's aspirin, in orange flavour, shaped like a little candy, in a bottle with no child-resistant cap, because the child-resistant cap will not be required in this country for another dozen years, and the whole concept has not been invented. It tastes lovely. Kenny thinks of it as a treat, and has said so. There is a cough syrup with codeine in it, which you can buy over the counter, and which works extremely well, for reasons that are right there on the label if anybody stopped to read the label. And there is a small brown bottle of paregoric. Paregoric is a tincture of opium. That is not a lurid description, that is the pharmacological definition. Opium, in alcohol, with camphor and anise. About 2 milligrams of morphine in a teaspoon. It sits in American medicine cabinets straight through this decade, purchasable without a prescription until 1970, and its 2 great domestic uses are settling an adult stomach and quieting a baby. Teething, colic, a cough that will not let anybody in the house sleep. A mother with a screaming infant at 2 in the morning gives the baby a few drops of an opium preparation, and the baby sleeps, and she sleeps, and there is nothing furtive about it whatsoever, and her own mother taught her the dose. I want to be fair about this, because it is easy to hear that and picture something gothic. This is not laudanum in a Victorian slum. The doses are small, and the product is standardized and regulated as a medicine, and most children came through it entirely fine. But it is opium, in a cupboard, at the height of a chair, in a house with a 7-year-old who thinks the aspirin tastes nice, and by the middle of the 1960s the profession will have thought better of the whole idea, and that will be the end of an era in American parenting that lasted about 150 years. Now the nursery itself, and the nursery is governed not by instinct but by a schedule, because in 1958 the modern, scientific, correct way to raise an infant is by the clock. You feed at 4-hourly intervals, not when the baby is hungry. At the times, if the baby is hungry at 2 hours, you wait. And the reason you wait, according to the reigning orthodoxy that your own mother learned and passed on, is that feeding on demand will produce a demanding child, and that a baby who learns that crying summons a mother has learned the wrong lesson about the world at the earliest opportunity. You do not pick up a crying baby outside its window. You let it cry. There are respectable manuals of the previous generation that instruct a mother never to kiss her child, to shake hands with it in the morning, and to be scrupulously unsentimental on the grounds that affection makes a weak adult, and you probably do not breastfeed. Because breastfeeding in 1958 is faintly backward. It is what your grandmother did because she had no choice. The modern woman uses formula, mixed at the sink from evaporated milk and corn syrup and water to a recipe written out by the doctor or from a can, and it is measured, and it is sterilized, and it is scientific, and it can be quantified in ounces on a chart, and the chart is the point. Somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of American mothers in this decade breastfeed at all, and by the time the babies leave the hospital most have stopped, in part because the hospital fed the baby formula on a schedule for a week while the mother was down the hall. You lay the baby face down to sleep. Everyone does. It is what you are told. It is what the nurse demonstrates. And the reasoning offered is that a baby on its back may choke. It will be 62 years from the birth of Nancy before a national campaign persuades the country to turn the babies over, and the number of small deaths that turning them over prevents is very large, and there was no way to know. And there is a book on your shelf that is quietly at war with all of it. It came out in 1946. It is by a pediatrician. It cost $0.25, and it has sold in numbers that put it behind only the Bible, and its famous opening line tells the mother reading it that she knows more than she thinks she does. Trust yourself. That single sentence is doing more work in 1958 than any other sentence in American parenting, because it is the first permission in 3 generations, and half the mothers on this street own the book and quote it to each other, and their own mothers regard it as dangerous nonsense that will produce a nation of soft, indulged children. And they say so at Christmas, out loud, every single year. As for what happens to you after the birth, that is also on a schedule, and it is a long one. A woman who has a baby in an American hospital in this decade does not go home the next day. She stays. Somewhere in the region of a week to 10 days, flat, in a ward. And for the first several of those days, she may not be allowed to get out of bed to walk, because the medical view is that a woman after childbirth must be kept absolutely still, and the consequences of keeping people absolutely still in bed for a week are only beginning to be understood. Her baby is not with her. The baby is in the nursery, down the hall, behind a window, in a row of identical cribs with identical blankets, cared for by nurses, and it is brought to her at feeding times and taken away again, and the fathers and the grandmothers stand at the glass and point. She may hold her own child for perhaps half an hour, 6 times a day, at the hospital's convenience. The rationale is hygiene and rest, and the effect, which nobody is measuring, is that a substantial number of American women spent the first 10 days of motherhood being brought their baby by appointment, and then she goes home, and there is nothing. No nurse who comes to the house, no follow-up, no 6-week check on her rather than the baby. No word in the language for what happens to some women in the weeks after a birth. If she cries every afternoon for a month, that is nerves. If she cannot get out of bed, that is nerves. And there is a thing you can take for nerves, which we have already found in the cupboard above the drinks, and which 36 million prescriptions a year suggests was doing a great deal of quiet work in this country that nobody was counting. The one mercy of the 10 days is the ward itself, and I do not want to skip it, because every woman who lived through it mentions it. 6 or 8 beds, women in every one, all of them in the same condition at the same moment, and after the second day the curtains stop being drawn. They talk from bed to bed. They tell each other things they will not tell their husbands for 30 years. They swap addresses, and some of them are still writing at Christmas in 1990. It is an accidental, institutional, badly designed thing that produced, entirely by accident, exactly the support that the system otherwise provided none of. And when hospitals get efficient and send everybody home in 48 hours to a private room and a silent house, that will go too. And nobody will notice it going. And that is childbirth for a married woman with a ring on and a husband in the waiting room. There is another version, and everybody on this street knows about it. And nobody discusses it. And this is the one that is not funny. There is a girl on Astor Court called Sandra who is 17 and who went in June to stay with an aunt in Baltimore. That is the sentence. It is a complete sentence, and it will not be elaborated on. She will come back in February, thinner and quieter, and she will finish her senior year a term late, and no one on this street, not one person, will ever refer to it again in her hearing, and quite a few of them will be genuinely kind to her in ways they cannot explain. What actually happens is this. An unmarried girl who becomes pregnant in 1958 is, in the view of the entire respectable world, a catastrophe that must be managed invisibly. She is removed. She goes to a relative, or more often to a maternity home run by a church or a charity, in another city, where she lives for the last months under a false first name with 30 other girls doing the same thing under theirs. She does housework. She is not permitted to give the other girls her real last name. She is counseled continuously and by professionals that the loving thing, the mature thing, the only thing a girl who truly cares about her baby would do is to sign. And then she gives birth, frequently without being allowed to see the child, sometimes with a sheet raised so she cannot. And she signs, and within a few days she goes home and resumes her life and is expected to never mention it. Between the end of the war and the early 1970s, something in the order of 1.5 million American babies were surrendered for adoption this way, and it is not a fringe phenomenon, and it is not a story about wicked people. The mothers who drove those girls to those homes believed, most of them, sincerely and with anguish, that they were saving their daughters' entire futures, and by the rules of the world they lived in, they were probably right, because an unmarried girl who kept a baby in 1958 lost her school, her prospects, her family's standing, and in many cases her family. And the fathers, the boys, went to college. Those women are alive now. Many of them are in their 80s. A great number of them never told anybody, not their later husbands, not their later children, and when they finally did start talking about it, in books and in interviews 40 and 50 years afterward, the country was astonished, which is its own indictment, because it was not a secret at the time. Everybody knew. The whole apparatus of knowing and not saying was the point. It is the single strangest normal of all of them, and it is strange precisely because it required the active daily participation of hundreds of thousands of decent people who all, individually, I thought they were being tactful. Sandra will be all right, as it happens. Not untouched, but all right. She will marry a man in 1964 who she does tell, on the third date, because she decides she would rather know early what kind of man he is, and he will turn out to be the right kind, and in 1991, a letter will arrive. Right. The children are due back, and the streetlights are not on yet, which leaves time for school, and school in 1958 is its own museum. Kenny's classroom has 34 children in it, and one teacher, Miss Dwyer, who is 26 and who is, by the standards of any era, extremely good at her job and who has an absolutely free hand. There is a paddle. It is in the principal's office. It is made of wood. Some of them have holes drilled in them to reduce air resistance, which is a sentence that should be read twice. And it is used on children on the backside in the office, and a note goes home afterward. And the note is not an apology, it is a notification. Corporal punishment in American schools is not merely legal, it is expected, and a parent who telephones the school to object is a curiosity. Ray's own father's response, on being told his son had been paddled at school, was to add a second one at home for the embarrassment. And Ray tells that story as a funny story, and it is not quite. Miss Dwyer does not use the paddle. Miss Dwyer uses the ruler on desks and a voice like a dropped tray and does not need to. But the boy at the desk behind Kenny writes with his left hand, or he did, until October, and now he does not, because he has been corrected. That is the word. Left-handed children in this decade are routinely and deliberately retrained. The left hand is taken out of use, sometimes tied, sometimes simply slapped away every time it reaches for the pencil, and the child is made to write with the right. And the results are a generation of adults with strange, cramped handwriting, an odd relationship with scissors, and in a number of documented cases, a stammer that appeared at 7 and never left. The stated reason is neatness. The underlying reason is that left-handedness is regarded as a fault, and the word for it in several languages is the word for sinister. And everybody involved would tell you they were helping. Nancy will start next year, and Nancy will wear a skirt to school every single day of her school career, including the days in February when the temperature is below freezing, because girls do not wear pants to school. And this rule will hold in most American districts into the 1970s. Girls wear skirts in snow. They wear pants underneath and remove them in the coat room on arrival, which is the compromise every mother in the northern half of this country has independently invented, and which no school board has ever formally acknowledged. And when Nancy is older and wants to play basketball, she will discover that girls' basketball is not the game her brother plays. Girls in most of this country play 6-a-side, 3 forwards, and 3 guards. And neither trio may cross the halfway line, so no girl ever runs the full length of the court. And there is a limit of 2 dribbles, and only the forwards may shoot. The reason given is that the whole court game is too strenuous for a girl's constitution. Stealing the ball is a foul, and one of the reasons offered for that is that it is unladylike. The gyms are packed for these games. The girls are ferocious. Entire towns turn out, and the players are not permitted to run more than half the floor because of a medical theory nobody has tested. It will take until 1972 and a federal law before any of this is seriously disturbed. The curriculum divides on the same line. From about 12, the boys go to shop and learn to use a lathe, and the girls go to home economics and learn to make a white sauce and a buttonhole and a household budget, and there is no crossing over, and if a girl asks to do shop, the answer is a laugh and not a policy, because a policy could be appealed. Nancy is 5 and is currently very interested in how the incinerator works and will be redirected. And school itself has its own strange furniture. There is a photograph of the president and a flag and a daily pledge. There is the drill with the desks. There is a jar of cod liver oil. There is, in some districts, a dunce cap, an actual conical paper hat, worn by an actual child on an actual stool in front of the class in the 1950s as an educational measure. And there is the report card, which grades a child not only on arithmetic, but on deportment, neatness, courtesy, and self-control, and which Kenny brought home in June with an excellent in reading and a needs improvement in self-control, and which Ray put on the refrigerator and which Kenny is still, 3 months later, extremely pleased about. I owe this decade some balance, because everything we have counted so far can leave you with the impression that 1958 was a hazard with a lawn on it, and the people who lived there did not experience it that way at all, and quite a lot of what they remember was genuinely better. Start with the toys, which are marvelous and which are trying to kill you. Kenny owns a chemistry set that contains chemicals. A modern chemistry set does not contain, in glass bottles, with a booklet of experiments and a spirit burner, and the booklet assumes a level of competence in a 9-year-old that the modern world has stopped assuming in adults. He owns a wood-burning kit, which is a hot metal stylus for scorching pictures into plywood, unsupervised. There are lawn darts in the Doyle's garage, which are steel-tipped spikes about a foot long that you throw into the air, with the intention that they come down somewhere near a ring, and children play this in yards. And the physics of it is exactly what you think it is. Air rifles are a normal birthday present for a boy of 11, and the standard warning is a phrase about an eye that every single person in this country has heard so many times that it has become a joke, and the reason it became a joke is the number of eyes. And a few years ago, briefly, you could buy a boy, a laboratory containing 4 samples of real uranium ore, a Geiger counter, a cloud chamber with a genuine radioactive source in it, and a government pamphlet on how to go prospecting for uranium, all for $49.50. It was not a hoax and it was not a fringe item. It was made by the most respectable toy company in America, the people who made the metal construction sets. It sold very badly, only about 5,000 of them, and it was withdrawn after a year. And the reason it failed was the price, not the uranium. Nobody wrote to complain about the uranium. Then the sun, and the sun is a story about the exact opposite of a warning. There is no such thing as sun protection in the way you understand it. There are products for the beach and their purpose, stated on the bottle, is to help you tan faster. Women lie in the yard with baby oil, sometimes baby oil with iodine stirred into it to deepen the colour, and there are people who use a folded piece of kitchen foil under the chin as a reflector to catch more of it on the face and neck. A burn is not a failure, it is stage 1. A burn is what you get on the first day, and then it goes brown. And there is a whole vocabulary of peeling. And children peel in sheets and are proud of it and compare. Nobody is stupid. Nobody has been told anything else. A tan in this decade means health, leisure, and money, which is a complete reversal of what it meant 60 years earlier, when it meant you worked outdoors. And it will reverse again, and the generation lying in the yard with the foil will find out about that in their 60s at the dermatologist. There is no air conditioning in this house. There is no air conditioning in most houses. There is an attic fan, which is a large fan in the ceiling of the upstairs landing that pulls air through the whole house if you open the windows at the right end. And on the worst nights of August, it is not enough, and so people go outside. They sleep on the porch. They sleep in the yard. In cities, whole families take blankets and sleep on fire escapes and on the flat roofs of tenements and in the parks. Thousands of people, in public, in perfect safety, and this is so ordinary that no newspaper reports it. And the reason a movie theatre in 1958 puts the words "cooled by refrigeration" on the front of the building in letters 2 feet high, with icicles painted on them, is that the air conditioning is the product, and the film is the excuse. Nobody locks anything. The front door of this house is not locked during the day, and frequently not at night, and you would have to hunt for the key. And this is true on every street in the development. The keys are in the car, in the ignition, on the drive. Marge walks into your kitchen without knocking and calls out from the hall, and you do the same to her. And the day either of you knocks will be the day something is seriously wrong. Children go into other people's houses, get a drink of water from a strange tap, and leave. And people hitchhike, not desperate people, ordinary people. Students go home for Thanksgiving by standing at the side of a road with a sign. Servicemen in uniform get picked up within minutes as a matter of civic duty, and Ray hitchhiked from Fort Dix to Philadelphia twice a month for a year and thought nothing of it. Drivers stop. It is normal, and it will stay normal for another 15 years. And then it will stop being normal quite quickly. And the reasons it stopped are a subject for a different night. Sunday is the strangest of the good ones, because Sunday is switched off. In this state, and in most of them, there are laws about what may be sold on a Sunday, and the answer is very little. The stores are shut, not shut early shut. The department store is shut, the hardware store is shut, and if you have run out of something on a Sunday afternoon, you have run out of it until Monday, and the country has arranged itself so that everybody has run out of it at the same time, and therefore nobody minds. There is church in the morning, and the attendance figures for this decade are the highest this country has ever recorded. And afterward, there is a roast. And afterward, there is the drive. The drive is the great vanished American pastime. There is no destination. You get in the car, all of you, and you drive out to look at things, at countryside, at a river, at other people's houses, at a new road being built, and you stop for an ice cream, and you come home, and the whole activity is the driving. Gas is about 30 cents a gallon. Nobody has anywhere to be. There is nothing on the television until the evening, and an entire generation of American children will describe, 60 years later, in almost identical words, the specific pleasure of lying in the back of a station wagon on a Sunday evening in summer, half asleep, watching telephone wires rise and dip against the sky, with the grown-ups murmuring in the front, and I have not got a single joke to make about that, because it sounds perfect. That is the honest ledger. A world with opium in the bathroom cabinet, uranium in the toy store, and a fog of pesticide down the street on Tuesdays, was also a world where nobody locked a door. Everything closed on Sunday, and the entire street would raise your children while you got the laundry in. Both columns are true. They were true simultaneously, in the same houses, on the same afternoons, and any account of this decade that gives you only one column is selling you something, generally nostalgia, occasionally politics. And it is now 5:30, and there is a beef roast that needs to come out of the oven at 10 to 7, and there are 2 children to be scrubbed and briefed, and there is a girdle upstairs with your name on it, because the company is coming. Ray works for Halleran Electric, which makes small appliances. And Ray is an assistant sales manager. And there is a divisional job coming open in the spring, and Ray is one of 2 men who might get it. The other man is called Duffy, and has been at the company 11 years and plays golf with people. And tonight Mr. Sutcliffe, who runs the division, is coming to dinner with his wife Eleanor. And Ray told you about it 8 days ago in a tone of studied casualness that fooled neither of you for a second, because this is not a dinner. This is an inspection, and the person being inspected is you. That sounds like paranoia, and it is not. In this decade, a number of large American corporations formally interview the wives of men they are considering for promotion. Not informally. Not by implication. They sit her down and they talk to her. And there is a file. And in some firms the wife is appraised by a visit to the home, or watched at the company party by somebody whose job it is to watch. And there are companies running seminars for executive wives to bring them up to standard. There is a film out a few years ago whose entire plot is an executive choosing his next general manager by interviewing the 3 candidates' wives. And it was received not as satire but as a comedy of manners, because everybody in the movie theatre recognized the situation. The questions are about whether she can entertain, whether she drinks too much, whether she will move without complaint, whether she is a talker, whether she is ambitious in the wrong direction, and whether she is, and this is the phrase people actually use, an asset to the company. The theory holds that a man is not an employee but a unit, and the unit includes a wife, and the company is buying both and only paying for one. So tonight you will cook a meal that must be good but not showy, keep a conversation moving without appearing to run it, agree with Eleanor Sutcliffe without appearing to flatter her, produce 2 children who are clean, brief, and charming, and then disappear entirely, and be interesting for exactly as long as is useful and no longer. And if you do all of that well, a man will get a job that carries $1,700 a year more, and the money will go into an account with his name on it, and nobody at Halloran Electric will ever refer to what you did tonight as work. And Ray knows. That is the thing. Ray is not a fool, and he is not a brute. He knows precisely what tonight is, and what it is costing you, and he has no vocabulary at all with which to say so, because he was raised by a man who came home from one war, and he went to another one himself at 19. And the emotional equipment issued to an American man of this generation consists of a firm handshake and the phrase, well, you know, which brings us to the men. And I want to give them a fair hearing, because it is easy to look at 1958 and see only what it did to women. And the men were in a box too, a smaller box, a better appointed box, a box with all the money in it, but a box with the lid on all the same. Look at what Ray is wearing, a dark suit, a white shirt, a narrow tie, a hat. That is not an outfit, that is a uniform, and the tolerance for variation is about the width of a tie. Every man on that train platform this morning was dressed identically, and if one of them had turned up in a green jacket, he would have been discussed for a week. There was a novel about it 3 years ago, about the man in the grey flannel suit, and the phrase escaped the book immediately and went into the language, because everybody knew exactly which man was meant. And 2 years ago, a journalist published a study of exactly what the American corporation had become, and gave it the title, The Organization Man, and it described a world in which a company does not simply employ you, it forms you. And the reward for being formed is security. And the price is that you must never be conspicuous in any direction, including upward. So Ray leaves at 7:20 and comes back at 6:10, 5 days a week, plus the Saturday mornings. And inside that gap, he is a person you have never actually seen. You have met 3 of the men he works with. You have never been to his office. He will not discuss what happens there beyond a headline, partly because he has been trained not to bring it home, and partly because the honest version, which is that he spends his days being pleasant to a man he does not respect in order to be given a slightly larger version of the same day, is not a thing a man of 1958 is able to say out loud, in this house or in any other, without feeling that he has failed at something, and the tally on that arrangement is being kept quietly in the hospitals. Middle-aged American men in this decade are dropping dead of heart attacks at a rate that genuinely alarms the medical profession. And next year, 2 cardiologists in San Francisco are going to publish a paper describing a pattern they have noticed in their coronary patients. The story of how they noticed it is almost too neat to be true, and is true. An upholsterer came to redo the chairs in their waiting room and remarked that he had never seen chairs wear out this way, only along the front edge of the seat, because these particular patients did not sit back ever. So the doctors started paying attention to the men rather than the arteries, and what they found was a whole personality. The watch checker, the interrupter, the man who is competitive about a line, the man who cannot be still. And they will report that heart disease turned up in that group something like 7 times as often. They will call it type A, and the phrase will get away from them and end up on coffee mugs. And the original observation, which is that a certain kind of American working life was quietly killing the men doing it, will get lost somewhere along the way. Nobody offers those men anything. There is no equivalent of Milltown for a man, or rather there is, and it is called a highball, and it is served at 4 p.m. by a colleague. A man does not go to a doctor about his nerves in 1958 unless something has gone very badly wrong indeed, and he certainly does not tell his wife, and he absolutely does not tell another man, And the one place in the entire culture where a man may show unguarded emotion in public without penalty is a baseball stadium, which is why they go, and why they shout, and why so many of them cry at films about dogs. And this year there is something extra on the train, because the country is in a recession. It started last fall, and it has been hard, harder than anything since the war. And unemployment went over 7% this summer, and the men on the 704, no men it has happened to. There was a man on Astor Court, 2 streets over, who was let go in March. And here is the strangest and saddest normal of the lot. And it is a true and documented pattern of this decade. For 11 days, he continued to leave his house at 7:20 in the morning, in his hat and his suit, with his case, and come home at 6:10. He drove somewhere. Nobody knows where. He sat somewhere all day for 11 days rather than let this street see him at home in the afternoon, and rather than tell his wife, who found out from the bank. That is what the box does. A woman in this decade who is drowning has, at minimum, a kitchen table, another woman, and a cup of tea, and she has Marge Doyle, who will come over uninvited with a subject she has been circling for a couple of weeks. A man in this decade who is drowning has a hat and a car, and 11 days, and now it is 6:20, and the Sutcliffes are coming at 7, and this house is going to be perfect. You have been building towards it for 2 days. The good tablecloth is out, which means the Ladies' Home Journal has had to be relocated. And there is a small dark joke in that which you have not shared with anybody. The silver is done. The windows are done. The children have been briefed with the precision of a landing operation. They will come down at 7:05. They will say, "Good evening, Mr. Sutcliffe. Good evening, Mrs. Sutcliffe." They will answer any question put to them in one clear sentence. They will not mention the dog's name, because explaining to a man of 58 why the beagle is called Sputnik is not a hill this family is dying on tonight. And at 7:20 they will go up, and they will stay up. The menu is a shrimp cocktail, a beef roast, and a lemon icebox cake, and every element of it has been chosen to be excellent while looking like no trouble at all, because a hostess who is visibly working has failed. There is a bowl of nuts. There is a dish of olives. The cigarette box on the sideboard is full, and the table lighter has been filled and tested twice. The ashtrays, all 6 of them, are clean and positioned, and there will come a moment around 9 o'clock when you will empty and wipe them without breaking stride or interrupting a sentence, and that maneuver is a skill, and you have it. And then you go upstairs and put on the maternity girdle and a navy dress, and do your face in 11 minutes, and look at yourself in the mirror. 5 months along, on your feet since 6, having today been weighed, scolded, prescribed a sherry, offered a cigarette by a physician, told about the leather cuffs by your neighbour, and required to be charming to a stranger for the purpose of your husband's career, and you put on your earrings, and you go downstairs. Because that is what is happening tonight. They arrive at 7:03, which is correct. Mr. Sutcliffe is heavy and genial and shakes hands too long. Eleanor Sutcliffe is 51, in grey, extremely pleasant, and misses nothing. And within 90 seconds of coming through your door, she has priced the carpet, identified the cake as homemade, noted that you did not apologize for anything, and formed a view. Ray makes the drinks, which is the husband's job in this decade, and the one piece of domestic labour a man may perform in front of guests without loss of standing. The children come down at 7:05. They are magnificent. Nancy curtsies, which nobody taught her, and which everybody pretends not to find funny. They go up at 20:00. Sputnik's name does not come up. Dinner is a success. And then, after the plates, without one word being spoken to arrange it, The entire party divides itself by sex like iron filings. The men go into the living room with the bottle. The women go into the kitchen with the coffee. This happens at every dinner party in America this year, and it is not enforced by anybody, and no host announces it. And it is as reliable as the tide. In the living room, Ray and Mr. Sutcliffe are discussing the division, which is the actual business of the evening. In the kitchen, Eleanor Sutcliffe helps you with the cups, which she does not need to do, and asks you about Ohio, and about the children, and how you find the neighborhood, and whether you would mind a move, and she asks that last one lightly while drying a saucer, and there it is. That is the interview. That is the whole thing. 40 minutes of the warmest possible conversation with one real question in it, and you answer it well, and she says, well, they do like a man who can move, and puts the saucer down. At 10:30, Mr. Sutcliffe has had, by your count, 4 whiskies and 2 glasses of wine, and at 11:15 he and Eleanor get into a car and he drives it home, 12 miles, on a dark road, and you and Ray stand in the doorway and wave, and neither of you thinks about it for 1 second, because nobody does. That is the normal that will land hardest on a modern listener, and it needs no exaggeration from me. Drink driving is against the law in 1958. And there is even a machine now that can measure it, invented 4 years ago. But hardly anywhere has one, and the test that actually matters is whether the officer at the roadside thinks a man seems drunk, and the officer's threshold and the officer's discretion are both generous, and the man is in a suit, and the man says he is on his way home from a dinner, and the officer says, "Take it steady, sir." There is a phrase for the last drink of the evening. It is called "one for the road," and it is exactly what it sounds like. And it is said cheerfully by hosts, while pouring. Everybody on this street drives home from everything. It will take another 20 years, and a group of mothers who have lost children and who will refuse, absolutely refuse, to let the country keep calling it an accident, before that sentence stops sounding normal. The door closes, and the house goes quiet, and Ray loosens his tie, and says the 4 words that mean the evening went well, which are, "Well, I think so." And then he turns on the television, and the box in the corner of this living room is 3 years old, and it has already rearranged the entire country. It is a piece of furniture. That is the first thing. It is a wooden cabinet the size of a small sideboard, with a screen in it the size of a dinner plate, and it has legs, and it cost about 1/5 of what Ray earns in a year, and every chair in this room has been turned to face it, which happened gradually, and which nobody decided. The picture is black and white and slightly convex, and the whole house watches the same thing at the same time, because there is one set, and there are 3 networks, and if you are not in the room at 8, you have missed it forever, because there is no other way to see it ever again. This produces something that will be completely extinct within 70 years, which is that on Tuesday morning, the entire country has watched the same show and can discuss it, and Marge and Eleanor Sutcliffe and the man who fixes the boiler all saw the same 40 minutes of the same thing last night. When it breaks, and it breaks, a man comes to the house with a case of glass valves and tests them one at a time in the back of the cabinet, and Kenny watches this the way a modern child watches a rocket launch. And what is on it is fascinating for what it will not say. Married couples on American television sleep in twin beds with a nightstand between them. Always. Every show. 2 beds, and if a husband sits on the edge of his wife's bed, he keeps 1 foot on the floor. And this is a formal rule in the broadcasting codes. And the total effect is a country that watches, every evening, hundreds of hours of married life in which no married person has ever gone to bed with anybody. 6 years ago, the most popular show in America had a problem, which was that its leading actress was visibly pregnant and refused to hide behind furniture for a season. The network's solution was to write the pregnancy into the show, which was unprecedented, on 3 conditions. The first was that the word pregnant could not be spoken, not once, by anybody. the characters said expecting. The second was that a priest, a minister, and a rabbi were brought in to read the scripts and approve them, which they did, all three, and reported that they could see nothing objectionable in a married woman having a baby. The third was that the episode announcing it was given a title using the French word for pregnant on the apparent theory that French is not really a language, it is a hint. 44 million people watched the birth episode that January, which was very nearly 3/4 of every household in the country that owned a television, and it knocked the inauguration of a president clean off the front pages the following morning, and that president said so himself, in public, with good humour. The country adored the whole thing and could not be told what it was. That is the shape of the whole medium in this decade. It is enormously powerful, and it is on a very short lead. And the lead is held by the sponsor, whose name is in the title of the show, whose product is advertised by the actors in character, and whose product is very frequently a cigarette. There is a hospital drama sponsored by a tobacco company. There are cartoon characters, drawn for children, who advertise cigarettes to adults in the evening slot. And the same characters sell breakfast cereal in the morning slot, and nobody at any point in that arrangement puts up a hand. And in the freezer, for the nights when nobody can face it, there is the other great television invention. A tray made of aluminum with compartments stamped into it, containing turkey, cornbread stuffing, sweet potatoes and peas, 98 cents, and you put the whole tray in the oven, and then you eat it off your lap in front of the set. The company that invented it 4 years ago expected to sell about 5,000. In the first full year, they sold 10 million. The name of the product is the name of the piece of furniture it is eaten in front of, which tells you which one of the two was really being sold. At 11, the last show finishes. And then there is the anthem. And then there is the test pattern. And then there is nothing. Because television in 1958 ends. The country switches off and goes to bed at the same time, which is a form of collective early night that no century since has managed. You go up. Ray checks the back door, which does not need checking and which he checks anyway, and turns off the lights. Nancy is on her side with one arm out of the bed, and you put it back. Kenny is on his front, diagonally, as always, having conducted some sort of campaign in his sleep, and the piece of asbestos in the cigar box is on the windowsill next to the bird's skull, and you do not know that it matters, and neither does anybody else, and you move it 2 inches, so it is not near the edge. Sputnik is on the landing where he is not allowed to be, and looks at you with the total confidence of a dog who has correctly assessed the political situation in this house, and stays. And you stand at the top of the stairs for a second, in a house that is 3 years old, on a street that is 3 years old, in a country that has never in its history been this rich or this hopeful or this certain of itself. And you put a hand on the banister and one on the bump, and you think about January, out of the window, the street, the Doyle's porch light. Mr. Petrosky's kitchen, still on, as it is every night, because he was at Anzio, and he does not sleep much, and everybody knows it, and nobody has ever said one word about it to him, which is either enormous cruelty or enormous tact, and is honestly a bit of both. Somebody's incinerator still going at the far end, one thin line of smoke going straight up, the stick that will be a maple, 400 houses, all of them containing people who have been told and who genuinely believe that they are living in the best arranged country in the history of the world, and who are, in a great many measurable ways, right. And here is the thought underneath all of it, and then we will let it go. Not one of the things we counted tonight felt strange to the people doing it. Not the fog truck. Not the leather cuffs. Not the 2 columns in the newspaper, or the pill in the cupboard, or the doctor's cigarette, or the girl who went to stay with her aunt in Baltimore. Every single one of them was ordinary, sensible, current best practice. And everyone doing them was somebody's kind mother or decent father. And the whole arrangement was held together not by cruelty, but by the most powerful force in human affairs, which is that everybody else is doing it and nobody has said anything. So, the honest question is not, how could they? The honest question is quieter and much less comfortable, and it is this. In 70 years, somebody is going to make a list about us. Something we do this week without thinking. Something that is on every high street and in every home and in every set of official guidelines is going to be on it. And the people reading that list are going to say, with total confidence and complete sincerity, "But how did they not know?" And the answer will be the same answer as tonight. It was normal. It was recommended. It was what the doctor said. Everybody was doing it. We do not get to know which one it is. That is the deal. All any generation ever gets is the chance to be a bit more suspicious of its own certainties than the last one was, and to be gentle about it. And honestly, on the evidence of tonight, being gentle about it may be the more important half, which is a very large thought for this hour, so put it down and go back to the top of the stairs in 1958, where a woman of 29 is standing in the dark with one hand on the banister, 5 months along, tired in her feet, faintly proud of a lemon icebox cake, listening to the last incinerator at the end of the street and thinking about a January she has been told nothing true about. She is going to be fine. Ray gets the job in March, and they do not move after all. The baby is a girl, born on the 11th of January in 1959, and Joan will remember almost nothing about the night, which is exactly what she was promised, and she will find in about 15 years that she minds this far more than she expected to. And Nancy, who is 5, and asleep, with her arm out of the bed, will have her own children in a room with the lights up and her husband holding her hand, and every single thing she says written down and listened to, and will not know, because Joan will never once tell her what it cost to get from one of those rooms to the other. Thank you for spending this long, strange evening in 1958 with me. It is easy to laugh at that decade, and I have laughed at it for 2 hours. And I want to end somewhere kinder than that. Because those people were not a punchline. They came out of a depression and a war, and what they wanted, with an intensity that we have no equivalent for, was for things to be ordinary. A house that was warm, children who did not get polio, a Tuesday with nothing in it. They built the entire decade out of that longing, and they overbuilt it. And the rules got heavy, and a great many people, most of them women, paid for that quiet with a silence that lasted the rest of their lives. And then their daughters took the whole thing apart, which is the best thing that can be said about how they raised them. So tonight, be glad of the small, ridiculous mercies of your own century. Be glad of a seatbelt. Be glad of a doctor who tells you the truth even when the truth is inconvenient, and of a door you can lock, and of a bank that has heard of you, and of the fact that whatever happens in your delivery room, you will remember it. Be glad of the shopkeeper who does not care what you buy, and the newspaper with one column of jobs in it, and the enormous, ludicrous, unearned luxury of being able to say a true thing out loud in your own kitchen, and spare a thought for Joan at the top of the stairs, in a house that smells faintly of roast beef and cigarettes, who did everything she was told, correctly, all day, for people who mostly loved her, and who is now going to bed. The lights are off on Larkspur Lane. The last of the smoke has gone up, somewhere in the dark.